A spontaneous and unrehearsed interview.
Hello, this is the 77th episode of Curiosityness, and welcome aboard. I'm Travis DeRose, the host, and this episode we're talking about the DeLorean Motor Company, DMC. That's right, it's still around. I talked to James Espey. Sorry, James, messed that up a bit, but talked to James. He's the vice president of the DeLorean Motor Company, and we do a deep dive into the history of DeLorean, talk about John DeLorean and the controversy with him and all that stuff, and kind of get a good, foundational company history of what DeLorean is and what DMC came to be. And then we jump ahead to the future, where the company is now, what's going on. Spoiler alert, they're building some new cars, so check out for that. You'll be able to buy like a brand new 2024 DeLorean. So we dive into that, but it was a very fun conversation with James. I've always loved a DeLorean and Back to the Future and everything, so I think you'll enjoy it. But sit back, relax, and here's episode 77 with James Espey of the DeLorean Motor Company. And boom, we're on. How you doing, James?
Outstanding, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being on. I think this. So you work for the DeLorean Motor Company.
I have for a little over 20 years now.
Nice. I think most people would be I think they'd be surprised to hear that the DeLorean Motor Company still exists.
Indeed, yeah. Even right here in our own neighborhood here in Houston, where we've been in Houston since '88. We've been in this facility for right at about 19 years now. And I can be at the gas station around the corner filling up a DeLorean, and somebody saying, "Man, where do you get parts for that thing?" And I'm like, "Dude, if you only knew, it's about a quarter mile away from you right now."
Right. Yeah, it's so cool. You guys are still it's still around. It's still called the DeLorean Motor Company, DMC. It's awesome. And you guys even have a branch out here in California, right in Huntington Beach, right by me.
Yeah, we have a location in Huntington Beach. We also have one just outside Chicago, and we have one in Orlando, Florida. Dude,
awesome. Well, so let's just get into it. I definitely want to tackle the whole, the history of DeLorean, the story and everything. So where does the car kind of begin, or how do we first hear about it? Maybe with John DeLorean, or where's a good place to start, I guess?
Obviously John DeLorean did not start his career in the auto industry at DeLorean Motor Company. He graduated college and pretty much went straight to Packard right after that. He had a little time at Chrysler, but went almost immediately to Packard. And from Packard, when Packard started to go down the tubes in the late 50s, John went to Pontiac. And Pontiac, within the next 10 years, he rose to be head of Pontiac. And then 69 or so, he was promoted to be head of Chevrolet. And after 2 or 3 years there, he was promoted to executive management, overseeing car and truck, I believe, for North America. And that, in John's words, that's kind of like going from being the quarterback to the team owner. And he didn't like that at all. And in '74, he resigned and started a consulting company. And everybody expected John to go off and do something with his own car company, and in '75 he actually did. From that point in '75, he had a designer in Italy named Giorgetto Giugiaro, guy who designed the Maserati Merrick, Lotus Esprit, the Volkswagen Golf, just a few. And he penned the shape of the car. They made a couple of prototypes here in the States, in Detroit. John was on the hunt for money to find a place to put the factory to actually build this car and finance the final development. John discovered, that as soon as he started mentioning, he was going to hire about 2,000 people, he was approached by a lot of governments and other jurisdictions looking to have him put his factory there. And in the end, in '78, after considering places in the United States and in the territory of Puerto Rico. He ended up getting a deal from the British government to put the factory just outside Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Okay.
So they gave him I've seen lots of different numbers over the years. I think the most commonly accepted number is about $177 million
Wow.
grants and loans to put the factory there. You may not recall, but Belfast in the late 70s, throughout a lot of the 70s and into the early 80s, there was a lot of violence, which they called the Troubles. And if you were Catholic in Belfast in 1980, it was about 40-50% unemployment. If you were Protestant, it was 20 to 30%. There were people at the DeLorean factory who was the first person, who were the first person in their family in 4 generations. We're talking son, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, to actually have a job.
Wow.
So it was, there were snipings and fire bombings, and the IRA was going up against the British government. And so the British government felt that if they could do something to alleviate unemployment and people had a job, it would keep them out of the streets.
Okay. So Belfast really saw this as like an opportunity to get a lot of employment opportunity in their area.
Yeah, 2,000 people doesn't sound like a lot in general terms, but there are studies that say for every direct job you create, like that 2,000, you indirectly create between another 3 and 5 for people who, for the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, basically everybody who, now that people have money to spend, is going to open a business or have to work someplace that now has more business. So it worked out pretty well. But that's how the company actually got its start.
Right. So how did things end up? Did that plan work for Belfast initially with, getting that new employment? Did things start to change around?
It absolutely did. Production, they started hiring, right after 1978, and at the peak of employment in late summer of 81, they had about 2,500 people working there. Unfortunately, 1981, in most of the world, especially probably the U.S., which at the time was the biggest economic powerhouse, the economy was not good. We've just gotten out of the Democratic presidency, the Iran hostage crisis. Ronald Reagan had just been elected not too long before, and the Reaganomics, greed is good era of the 80s hadn't quite yet taken hold. Mm-hmm. Interest rates on cars were as much as 14, 16, 18%, and that was a good deal.
Wow. Jeez.
DeLorean Motor Company had one product, a sports car, that sold for $25,000, which was big money in 81. Mm-hmm. So in the winter of 81, it was a bad winter, one of the worst in years. The car industry was at its lowest point since World War II, or since just before World War II.
Right.
And so it was a bad time to be selling $25,000 sports cars. And in the winter, of course, is already a bad time for sports cars in most of the U.S. But anyway, when the car quit selling for various reasons, those aforementioned ones included, the cash register stopped. John gambled. John had a deal with the British government that the more people he hired, the more grants that he got. And so John gambled in 81 that he could increase production, hire more people, end up with more money from the British government that would tide them through this bad spell. It would also make a proposed stock offering look good. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it didn't work. All the working capital was eaten up by hiring these people and buying all of these additional components to build these extra cars as he doubled production up to about 80 cars a day. The economy did not improve in time. The stock offering did not go through because the economy was bad. And John, in early 82, found himself in a big cash crunch. All of the working capital of the company existed, but it existed in the form of about 2,500 or so cars that people weren't buying.
Okay.
And so by spring, summer of 82, John was looking anywhere he could get some money. John was approached by a neighbor of his in the house he had in Southern California. Said, "Hey, John, I've got some friends that want to put some money in your company." And John was like, "All right, great, bring it on."
Yeah.
And it turned out that his neighbor was a informant for the FBI, and he was trying to put together a drug deal under the direction of the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when John was arrested, but John, once he learned, and this is by John's account, once he learned it was cocaine, he tried to back out, and he claimed, that they threatened to send his daughter's head home in a shopping bag.
Whoa.
They said that he needed to come up with $2 million, and they would give him $60 million. And the unrealistic economics of that aside, John said, "Look, I don't have $2 million. Every dime I've got, I put into this company."
Yeah.
And the FBI said, "Okay, we'll front you $2 million, and then you can pay us back out." So it was just like they were doing anything to keep him from getting out of this.
Yeah, really.
So he was arrested in October of '82 at a hotel in Los Angeles. So lots of your listeners have probably seen the FBI, a little grainy black and white video in the hotel room. And, of course, when you're arrested, it's on the front page as it was then.
Yeah.
2 years later, when you've been found not guilty by reason of entrapment, it's page 3 of the life section. So,
right.
Not one of I get a lot of people just like who don't know DeLorean Motor Company is still around. They say, "Is John DeLorean still in jail?" Well, John never went to jail.
Yeah.
Passed away at age 80. This was back in 2005, 15 years ago now, March of 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And once he was done with the drug trial, it was nothing but fighting lawyers for basically the rest of his life.
Man, dang, such a bummer. And so I didn't realize. So you mentioned this quickly, but his neighbor kind of approached John DeLorean as because he was already like an informant for the FBI. So was he just kind of hoping to get like a big name for himself?
He wanted to get a big name for the FBI, and
okay.
He was working the angle that if he was able to bring John down, that they would put him in the witness protection program. He was already in trouble with some of his previous friends who were in the drug trade. There's a great documentary that just came out last year called "Framing John DeLorean."
Yes, with Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, it's available streaming on Amazon, and I was just on a United Airlines flight not long ago, and it was on the in-flight entertainment. So there's lots of places to see it, but it is a very, and I tell people, it's a very painfully accurate story in some places.
Okay, good.
It's really well done, and it tells the story far better than I ever could.
Nice. Okay, that's good to hear. I was curious because it's a great documentary. It's interesting how they do it too with Alec Baldwin sort of acting as John, but then you see the behind the scenes of him just talking about it too. But yeah, I was curious to hear your thoughts. But it's a pretty accurate film, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. It's just it can. The guy who was the producer is a guy named Tamir Ardon, and he's I've known him since he was a teenager running around DeLorean shows with a video camera, and now he's done this documentary for the Independent Film Channel, and it came out great. And he has a lot of interest in it, and he's pretty much this is what he's wanted to do for probably the last 20-25 years. It's great to see him get to the point where he's had such success with it.
Yeah, cool, good for him. Yeah, it's an awesome documentary. And then so just to kind of jump back again, because this is kind of, before my time and stuff, but John DeLorean was, even before he started DMC, he was kind of very qualified in the automotive industry and pretty well known, wasn't he?
He was a brilliant automotive engineer, had a unique knack for marketing that you don't typically see in engineering types. John was rebellious in his career. GM was a pretty straight-laced place in the still is probably. John was the guy with the sideburns and the long hair and the open-collared shirts.
Right.
Eight women half his age, spending a lot of time on the West Coast, hanging out, in Hollywood and things like that. So, it was John was a unique individual at GM that the likes of which, we'll probably never see again at GM. And, he pretty much, the Elon Musk of his day.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, so when he basically announced that he was going to build his own car and everything, it wasn't really a big surprise. People kind of expected it, and he was fairly qualified to do this.
Absolutely. The one thing, that John probably didn't have, and John admits he didn't have a lot of experience in, is raising money.
Okay.
John tells an anecdote in his book, that when he needed to build a $500 million foundry in some part of the United States, he filled out a form and sent it around, and a month later it came back with all the signatures on it, and boom, there you go, build your foundry. And it's a little different when you're a little guy, going out trying to raise money that it takes to engineer a car from the ground up, hire the people that you need to do that, the qualified people, identify suppliers and get suppliers to work with you as an unproven and, unproven manufacturer at least. Really the whole strength of the project was carried, by John's reputation. That's if you or I had gone to the British government with this plan, we wouldn't have got past the front door because of John's reputation in the automotive industry. He was able to convince 345 dealers to sign up at a minimum of $25,000 apiece. He was able to bring some of the best and brightest minds in the car industry to leave other well-known, long-established manufacturers to come work with him. Obviously, we talked about the British government. So he's very charismatic, incredibly intelligent, well-spoken. Just as I said, he's a great guy. In terms of his ability and his skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, it's kind of a bummer that he's like remembered for the cocaine trial, and when you really get the details of it, it's just it's really sad that was the case.
Later in John's life, I met him and got to spend some time with him. And one day we were having lunch at his home in New Jersey, and we were talking. And we rarely, shouldn't say rarely, we never talked about the car company. We never talked about the car. We never talked about drugs. We never talked about any of that.
Wow.
And I did that intentionally because I knew that if I wanted to hear the same stories he'd been telling everybody for the last, at that point when I first met him, probably 15 years, that all I had to do was ask the same questions. So from the time I was able to meet with him, sit with him, talk to him on the phone, I didn't bring up any of that. We talked about current events. We talked about real estate. We talked about ex-wives, which by that time we both had a couple. All just other things. And one day at his house, we were having a conversation about South America. And I don't remember the actual context, but we were talking about, how generally speaking, it's a corrupt environment. If you want to build a factory, you got to pay somebody's brother to do the architectural work for you. You got to pay somebody else's brother to sign off on the permits and all this. And John had this incredibly insightful concept and idea about, how to fix these problems. And I was like, man, that's awesome. I mean, why aren't you doing something like that? He said, well, I've got a lot of great ideas, but nobody will listen to me anymore.
Oh, man.
And that has stuck with me for, it's been 23 years since our first meeting. And I was like, man, can you imagine, being that intelligent and articulate and having these ideas, and then nobody will listen to you. And that's just got to be so for a man like John, who had been to the top of the mountain and then fallen, knowing what it is like when people do hang on your every word, and then not having that anymore. It's got to be humbling. I think is your state.
Yeah, totally, man. So crushing. And he was kind of working on designs for another DeLorean or a new car, even too, later on, wasn't he?
Yeah, he always was saying, first time I met him, we were at lunch, and he was sketching out some stuff on a napkin to give me an idea of what he was talking about. And in the back of my mind, I thought, this is really cool stuff. But I'm thinking, once you've lost a couple $100 million of other people's money, are you really likely to get any more?
Yeah.
John was an intelligent guy, but I think he felt, that if he had a great idea, people would come. And I just think because of the other trials, not in the literal sense, but I guess both in the literal and figurative sense, the rest of the trials and tribulations he had throughout his later years, it was an insurmountable obstacle to overcome. I used to talk to him, and you're too young to probably remember Richard Nixon as president. But I said, Richard Nixon resigned the presidency, the only president to do that. And he, by the late 90s or so, he was starting to become a little more highly regarded as an elder statesman. I used to tell John, if Richard Nixon's reputation can be rehabbed, man, you should not have any problem at all.
Yeah, right.
But John was notoriously private, kept to himself. It was only much later in life, in the year 2000, when he went to the first national DeLorean event that was held in Cleveland, Ohio, and he was, it was like a rock star, basically. Everybody wanted to get pictures with him, have him sign their cars, do all this kind of stuff, and and I think that was really gratifying to John, and I'm glad he got to see it before he passed away, because I think he felt that he was going to get, not such a warm welcome. What'd you put this slow engine in the car for? Well, what about the drugs? And John didn't want to deal with that, and I don't blame him. I wouldn't either. But the fact that his daughter was able to convince him to come, and then I think he, by all accounts, even today, it was a very enjoyable experience for him and for the people he got to interact with.
Nice, cool. Yeah, that's good to hear that he got to kind of experience that and feel the love, because there's a big and a kind of a hardcore group of DeLorean fanatics out there, it seems like.
I think they're the group of people that are obviously interested in the DeLorean to one degree or another far exceeds the number of vehicles available for each of them to own one. The factory only really made about 9,000 cars, and I know, on our our Facebook page has got about 186,000 followers, and our Instagram about 47,000. So and I think you can't talk about why the DeLorean is still known today without talking about Back to the Future.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever get sick of that? The constant comparison of the Back to the Future car?
Well, it's a love-hate relationship. I enjoy the movies, I have for decades. This being the 30th anniversary, or excuse me, this is the 35th anniversary of the first movie. And I always tell people, someplace in the world right now, one of those three movies is on TV, and somebody's seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
The internet, they're going to type in DeLorean and say, wow, hey, it's a real car. It's not a movie prop. It's something I can own one of these.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have this constantly regenerating stream of people being exposed to the car and the brand is, for company that hasn't had a new product basically in very nearly 40 years. I mean, I don't think there's any other company out there that's got that, really.
Yeah.
So that's great, but unfortunately now, I've been a DeLorean fan really, since the car came out. I bought my first one in 95. I got to the point in life where I could afford one and in a position to. And then, so in the last 25 years or so, I've seen less focus on the drugs and less focus on the movies and more focus on, hey, it's really not a bad car. It's certainly unique for the era, and that's important. John didn't build a car to be the punchline of a joke. He didn't build a car to be a movie prop. He built a car because he thought he could do something better and had better ideas and concepts, and someone else did. Mm-hmm. And I think time has passed, and the stigmas of the drug trial, of course, are behind us, and we're in I think, a kind of cool and unique position because people are starting to recognize the car for what it is, and at the same time, we still have this stream of people being exposed to it through, probably, one of the most warmly thought of film trilogies in cinematic history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's how I grew up. We had the Back to the Future trilogy on VHS. I loved it, watched it all the time. And then, when I was 15, turning 16, I was, looking to get my first car and desperately wanted a DeLorean, because of the movies that had turned me on to it. And I had researched them and looked at them forever. But I think because of that movie, they've kind of hold their resale value, or they're very popular. So I couldn't really afford a DeLorean, but as my backup plan, I got a Bricklin. Are you familiar with those?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I was able to track down a Bricklin that was for sale local. Wasn't running or anything, but I was like, still has those gull wing doors. It's kind of got cool styling, almost like a 70s Corvette-ish. So that was like my backup plan there. And I was able to convince my mom that it was safe because it was the SV1, the safety vehicle one. So it all worked out. I was able to get it and get it running. So that thing was pretty fun for a while.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's neat. There's a lot of comparisons between the Bricklin and the DeLorean because of the doors, and it's unfortunate, that the Bricklin project ended as it did. I think, like DeLorean, had it been able to survive for another couple of years, we would have seen a lot of greater things out of both of them in terms of product quality, product features, and we would have had the resurgence in the economy. Bricklin, was at a bad time in mid 70s, energy crisis, just the whole economic doldrums of the 70s. They might have had to stick it out a little bit longer, but DeLorean, I think, certainly would have had greater opportunity in 83, 84, 85, to really, I think if they had made it that long, they'd still be around today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, that would have been cool if they were still here today.
We're working on it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you guys are. Yeah, so let's jump into that. So what happened? So after the kind of the drug bust and everything, DeLorean has to file for bankruptcy, right?
The company filed for bankruptcy in late '82. All of the unsold cars and the remaining parts that had yet to be assembled into cars were sold to a company based in Columbus, Ohio, and they moved everything there. From '83 until '95, '96, if you needed a DeLorean part, more than likely it came out of this big warehouse in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
In, say, '95, '96, because that's about the time we acquired. Prior to that, we had been strictly in the business of service and restoration of DeLorean cars starting in '88. And in '95, the people who own these parts in Ohio said, hey, we've been doing the DeLorean gig now for 12 years, so we're ready to get out. And so Stephen Wynn, the guy that owns DeLorean Motor Company here, he made a deal to buy all those parts, and we had a warehouse built here in Houston, Texas, 40,000 square feet. We moved everything down here. So now we're the world's largest parts, service, and restoration facility. And at any given time, we've got between 30 and 50 DeLoreans just in Texas alone for service or restoration.
Wow.
Between 3.5 and 4 million individual DeLorean parts. About 90% of them came out of the factory in 1982, 1983.
Wow.
And, full set of engineering drawings. So as we run out of stuff, we go out and have stuff made again. We're always on the hunt for new suppliers to fill holes in the inventory. And then Stephen's goal and dream, and mine, after I started here in '99, was obviously not to sell dirty, dusty old parts out of a warehouse for the rest of our lives, but to be able to kind of pick up where maybe John had left off and work on a program of continuous improvement. We knew, nobody was going to give us $177 million to start a DeLorean project again, but we were fortunate in that, realistically, we've got enough parts here in the building without significant expense. And by significant, I mean, $5 or $10 million to be able to build about another 500 cars fairly easily. Because there's so much stuff left.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've done the walkthrough. You're probably familiar with Google Street View.
Mm-hmm.
I've got something called Google Places, and we had where a photographer come in and do a complete walkthrough of our 40,000 square foot facility. And so we've got it online. So just like in Google Street View, you click on the arrows on the ground and you can walk through walk through doors and walk around the whole building, see everything we've got.
Oh, awesome.
I've got a website for it set up at DeLoreanTour.com.
Okay.
Tour, like people. And so we worked for a long time. And in the 2012, 2013, we started working with SEMA, the Specialty Equipment Manufacturers Association, which is like the automotive aftermarket trade group.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted to make a path for low-volume manufacturing to exist here in the United States. Low-volume manufacturing, along the lines of someone like Lotus, Morgan, the old TVR in England, which is where they have the laws set up for that. Right now, until this law eventually got passed in 2015, all car manufacturers were treated equally. If you built 200 cars a year or 2 million cars a year, you followed the same regulations. They kept a lot of all the small players out of it.
Right.
So we worked with SEMA, our local congressman and senator, and we were able to work with SEMA to get a bill signed into law at the end of 2015 that created a carve-out in the federal motor vehicle safety standards for low-volume manufacturers, recognizing that a company building 50, 200, or 50, 100, 200 cars a year didn't have the same resources as a GM or a Ford or a Chrysler or a Toyota.
Mm-hmm.
And the law was passed at the end of 2015, and the law said that the alphabet agencies in Washington, D.C., in particular NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, had a year to finalize these regulations. Well, they just both finished this past December, so only about 3 years late.
Oh, jeez.
Well, there was a lot of things happening in that time frame. It's easy to point the finger and say, well, it's your typical government inefficiency. But, in their defense, they had a change in the White House, which means a lot of people, lost their jobs. A lot of people had to get hired and find their way around.
Right.
Airbag crisis brought on by the bad airbags from Takata. That was more important than helping, 12, 15 different companies that want to build a couple hundred cars a year each.
Right, yeah.
Rightfully so. And all the autonomous and self-driving stuff now, that is the future, and the future is moving faster than the regulations can keep up. So that had to take precedence. But we think now we're on a good path. The public comment period ended a couple of weeks ago. And we're hopeful that within the next 6 to 12 months, we'll have an actual final rule. From that point, we believe we could be as little as another 6 to 12 months away from starting production.
Oh, wow.
Plus, it makes it really less than confident about the government's ability to stick to a timeline now. And so we're reluctant to commit to tooling or commit to purchasing or a particular engineering development path until we really know exactly what these final regulations are going to be.
Right, yeah.
Probably 6 to 12 months away, and then there'll be the ramp-up period. And lots of things can happen. We've got another election here coming up this year.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on which way that goes, that could change everything completely, both politically and economically. If the economy stays as it is now, and we're in the longest economic expansion in history right now, and what goes up must come down, as the saying goes. So we'll see what happens there. But if the economy continues, then we should be in a good position. If the economy, stock market crashes, this Chinese coronavirus, and I shouldn't mean the virus itself, but the economic issues it's causing in China.
Mm-hmm.
If China gets a cold, the rest of the world gets the sniffles now, basically, economically speaking. And if that happens, well, then that may change the dynamic completely, and it wouldn't be economically feasible at that point. So we're hoping our window has not passed, and we're carrying on as if it's not going to pass. But we are keeping an eye on which way the wind is blowing for sure.
Man, this is so cool. It's so exciting. So those these different regulations for a low production car company, is it just kind of allowances and differences on like safety and emissions and stuff like that?
There's really no give on emissions. Any vehicle produced under this program has to use a current model year emissions certified engine that has also been certified for this program. So it's not like we can just go out and pull an engine out of a new Corvette and throw it in the car and say, hey, it's got a current model year engine. No, it has to be certified for this program as well.
Okay.
That significantly narrows the pool of available drivetrains. But that's the biggest emissions catch, which is not that big of a deal in the overall scheme of things. Like everything else, all it takes is money.
Mm-hmm.
Emission, or as far as safety, it does give waivers that basically the vehicle that is being replicated, in our case, the 1981 DeLorean, has to have at least the same minimum safety features as the original 1981 car did.
Okay.
I think this is something that has given NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety, a bit of heartburn. But let's say you're a guy who's going to make replicas of 1930 Fords. Well, they didn't have safety glass. They didn't have airbag or seat belts. Are you really going to let somebody buy a new car today without seat belts in it? Not very likely. So, fortunately, the DeLorean, was built with safety in mind. It's got great side impact protection. It's got great roof crush. So if it rolls over, you're not going to pancake. Already has 4-wheel disc brakes, and with some of the technological updates, we believe that we'll be able, as a result of that, between the new engine and the electronic controls and the new brakes that we'll be putting on the car, because it'll have considerably more power, that we believe we'll be able to offer traction control and some more modern things that will add to the safety that was not even, was probably just a dream in 1981.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. So it'll be, I guess kind of the goal is to have the essence and the feeling and vibe of the old car, but maybe similar to like a resto mod, where then, it's a bigger engine underneath and bigger brakes and everything.
And and we're working on a completely a modernized interior. People, that's where you spend most of your time when a car is behind the wheel, not standing outside looking at it. So we're not going to change the shape. That's what people know. That's what people like. But the interior, people expect, backup cameras, Bluetooth audio, the ability to connect it to your phone for navigation, things like that. So all that will be in place, of course, and we'll have cruise control, which they didn't have on the DeLorean in '81, and we'll have heated and cooled seats. So there are lots of because we want people to enjoy the time in the car. We want people to drive the car, and the best way to do that is to make it so that the interior is a very comfortable place to be. Which and now cars people have been driving for the last decade or so. I mean, that's what they come to expect now. So you can't very well not have it.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so cool. It's so exciting. And just to be clear for people listening, this will be like, it'll be basically it'll be like a 2022 DeLorean. It's not like a restored 1980s DeLorean, right?
That's correct. It will use a significant portion of the original factory parts that we have in the warehouse here. That's the way we can do it cost efficiently. And I've had some people say, well, if you're using so many of the parts from '81, how can you actually make the car any better than it was in 1981? And we tell people, basically, for the last very nearly 40 years now, we consider it as if we've had 9,000 prototypes on the road, and we see everything that goes wrong from use, abuse, lack of use, overuse. So, and over the years, we've already addressed a number of the things that are known problem areas on the DeLorean. And by being able to take advantage of some of the modern manufacturing techniques and the new technology that's available now that was not then, we believe we'll be able to make a car that's has better performance, it's quieter, and a lot more fun to drive.
Yeah. Oh man, so cool. And then, so how many of these do you guys anticipate you'll be able to make?
Realistically, we're going to set. The plan is to set up a small assembly facility here in our Houston facility, and we believe we can pretty easily do about 1 or 2 cars a week before we would outgrow that, and that's so it will be low volume production as the law mandates. The law actually says that we could build as many as up to 325 cars per year. But I don't see that happening. That's a lot of cars for a small company to do. Basically, that's more than a car a day based on a 5-day work week. That's about a car and a half a day based on a 5-day. We'd rather do it at the speed of about 1 a week, so we can make sure that the quality is there, fit and finish. And also, we have to be cognizant of that. Realistically, we have enough spares or parts here to build about 500. But we want to make sure that if any of these cars that we build or any of the other, several thousand or so that are still left out there are involved in an accident, that they have parts for them. And that's one of the side benefits of this. Like I said, we've got. We're going to spend $5 or $10 million to fill the holes in the inventory, and what that means is a lot of things that have not been available for sometimes decades. Now you'll be able to get if you already own a DeLorean. So we're going to be increasing the availability of parts at the same time we're filling holes in the inventory, so we can start to assemble new cars. And then hopefully, you say, well, the next question I get from people is, well, what are you going to do when you run out of parts?
Right.
The car will be popular enough and we'll sell enough of them that then we can just continue to fill the holes in the inventory as they present themselves to us during production, and have again kind of like the Back to the Future and exposing to people. We'll have a constantly regenerating stream of inventory for both spare parts and for future production.
Whew, man. And so do you guys have an estimate of what the price point of these new ones might be?
Realistically, we have a ballpark of where we'd like it to be, and we've done some preliminary studies with bill of materials and things like that, but really until we get the final regulations from the government, we don't know if our numbers are good or bad. If they suddenly decide to throw up something that says, okay, well, every car, has to have a new anti-collision force field installed
right.
on it. They're like, oh crap! Well, there goes our bill of materials. That's going to add another 20,000 to the car right there. So realistically, we would like to see it start around 100, and then based on different performance, or based on different options, upgrades, some what we call bespoke work, where somebody wants an interior to match, this cool leather jacket they've got, or or whatever it might be, to max out somewhere in the 130 to 140 range probably. But that's all subject to change based on what the rules end up saying, which we're still waiting on the final ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Well, that's fair. That sounds reasonable too. And then, so also when you guys got when you bought all the inventory, DeLorean inventory from that company in Columbus, Ohio, did you got the DeLorean copyright and everything to the logo and name?
I'm gonna rephrase your question.
Okay.
When we started using the name DeLorean Motor Company in 1995, Stephen, I wasn't here at the time, Stephen reached out to John DeLorean and said, hey, I've just bought all the leftover inventory of parts, and I'm wanting to change the name of my business and use the name DeLorean Motor Company. And John told Stephen, well, I hope you have better luck with it than I did. And from that point forward, we went back and we started to work to acquire and also register various trademarks, intellectual property rights, to the point now where here in 2020, we have a good portfolio of stylized branding and trademarks in the U.S. and abroad for the DeLorean car and the DeLorean Motor Company.
Nice. It's so cool. Yeah, the DMC really does still exist. This is so exciting.
I just got a text from my guy. He's running late, so I probably have about another instead of 10 minutes, I probably have about another 25 or 30. Just so you know. Cool.
No, good to hear. Yeah, because we should definitely let's talk about the museum now. Tell me about that.
When we acquired all of this inventory of parts in the mid-90s, it also came with a significant amount of engineering drawings, engineering records. We have a full set of drawings for every part on the car, as I mentioned earlier, and all the engineering records. Lots of internal company correspondence and memorandums, and some tooling, some test equipment. And Stephen in 2005, 2006, he's like, what are we going to do with all this stuff? And I said, well, realistically, it belongs in a museum. It's going to have historical value to people in the future. And he was like, well, why don't we start a museum? And, in the naivete, that you have, you say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's just do that. So we did the paperwork to start the process of a Texas corporation, and we're hoping to get our 501c3 status here this year. And so we basically have loaned a considerable portion of all of this stuff that really has no pertinent day-to-day value other than the drawings, which we reference almost daily, probably as we're filling holes in the inventory. Mm-hmm. A lot of records on like who bought cars new in '81 and what dealers they came from, and because that's one of the things. As the DeLorean factory was in Northern Ireland, the records were not as complete of production here in the States, and then when in the way the company crashed and burned, so to speak, in both the factory and the U.S. company in late '82. There wasn't a lot of priority placed on records of production and things like that. They knew that they needed to keep all the financial stuff because they were in bankruptcy, and they knew they needed to keep all the engineering drawings in case they ever needed spare parts and things again. But even that was, far off into the future, knowing how many parts they still had that had yet to be assembled into cars. So, we're I mean, to this day, there is still no factory documentation that says exactly how many cars were made, how many were gray interior, how many were black, how many had 5-speed manuals, how many had 3-speed automatics, what day were they built on, all this kind of stuff. So, we're fortunate that over the last, 25 years since we acquired this inventory, which we've, as a side thing, as a project of the museum, myself and another employee here, we've kind of taken it upon ourselves to try to compile all these various sources that we've either uncovered or discovered or had donated over the years to, answer the simple question, how many DeLoreans were built, which nobody really knows. And when you think about it, obviously the factory knew, and they, based on some of the other records we've got here, they had fairly extensive documentation on every single car that was made. Because we have some of those packets for a very, 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 very small handful of the cars. So if you imagine they had all of those for approximately 9,000 cars, where did it all go? Well, honestly, most of it probably went to the dump, went in the landfill, and it just kills me, because I'm a big history buff, and the history of the DeLorean is something that basically I've been following for 80% of my life at this point, and it's just so fascinating, to me that when something new turns up, that it comes, and we're able to preserve it, and then we scan everything, so we have a good backup of it, other than the hard copy,
right?
And as we get time, we put a lot of it up on the website, and that's just it's a neat project, and that's for a company that really was only in production for about 4.5 years. It's amazing how much paper they generated.
Right.
We have really probably less than 5% of it.
Oh man, oh man. Okay, wow. So the museum isn't. There's nothing to come visit to yet, is there?
There's no physical standalone museum. We're fortunate at the museum. I kind of wear two hats here. I've got a hat that is my DeLorean Motor Company hat, and I've got a hat that's my DeLorean Museum hat. And wearing the museum hat, I'll say we're very fortunate that the DeLorean Motor Company gives us some space, one, to store all of this in a secure, climate-controlled environment, and also to put up a rotating display of the things that we have. So when people do come to visit the DeLorean Motor Company facility in Texas, they have a chance to see some of these items right in front of their eyes, as opposed to seeing them online. Because there's just no way to display everything, either online or in the store. So we rotate it frequently, and it's primarily old photographs, some videos, interesting documentation of things like that, and then there's memorabilia. There was brochures and things that either never got printed, or artwork for things that were never done in terms of cars and things like that. The company was planning to introduce a burgundy interior for the 1983 model year, and there's one car that was built as a test car with this burgundy interior. It's in England.
Oh wow!
Private collection. But we have a incomplete set of the burgundy interior pieces here. That's the other set of samples that did not make it into a car. So we have a steering wheel and a glove box and some interior components, which they weren't just a fly-by-night company. They were working towards a blue interior. They did end up doing some tan interiors for the gold cars.
Oh yeah.
And they did one blue interior car that's in a private collection in Monaco now. So lots of interesting stuff. If you're into the history, and you talked earlier about people that are just nuts about DeLoreans. And for the people that are really nuts about DeLoreans, this is worth a visit. It's interesting to see the stuff, and putting back on the hat for DeLorean Motor Company. I've been here 20 years. I'm usually here 6-7 days a week, even though we're only Monday through Friday. But when visitors come in and they're just blown away by everything they can see, it reminds us, for a lot of people here, it's a job. You come in the morning and you go home, and you kind of lose that feeling, that what you're doing is really kind of cool, and you do work someplace, special. And that's how. And so it's nice when people come in and are appreciative. Wow, just having their mind blown by the stuff that is still left after 40 years.
Yeah. Man, this is awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to come visit and check all this stuff out, James. It's just so awesome. I'm so happy that you guys are doing this and preserving the history and everything, and still sharing the story and doing all this. So, yeah, thank you very much for sharing all this. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Happy
cool.
to do it. It's fun.
Yes.
That's what my dad told me when I was little. If you do something you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right. No, awesome. And then, so for people listening, where should we send them? I'll link up to DeLoreanTour.com for folks to check that out. But if they want to kind of learn more about, DMC now and what you guys are doing with the new productions and everything like that, where should we send them?
For people interested in the latest publicly available updates on the new production, that's at newDeLorean.com. For everything related to the history, that would be DeLoreanMuseum.org. And then for our day-to-day operations, selling parts and doing service and restoration and selling cars of the original 81 to 83 models, it's just DeLorean.com.
Perfect. Cool. Well, I will have links for people listening to click on that stuff and check it out easy. But man, this was so fun, James. I really do appreciate you coming on. This is just such a fun story. I really enjoyed hearing it from you. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I love telling the story.
Well, there you have it. Thanks for joining me and listening into episode 77 and making it to the end. Hope you enjoyed the episode with James from the DeLorean Motor Company. I know I sure did. So thanks to James for being here. I really thought it was a fun episode and seriously enjoyed learning about that. If you want to join me, Travis, you can do that. I'm on Instagram at TravDeRose, TravDeRose. If you have thoughts or ideas or concerns or feedback, you can send me an email at travis@curiosityness.com. And we're on YouTube and all that stuff. And I don't know. We promote it all the time, or I do. I'm the only one. But that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in episode 78. Bye-bye.